They changed the broadcast for Twitter. We now need a premium subscription. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tabnine Live. We had a little bit of a hiatus last month. I was traveling all over the country as we sponsored some AI user group AI engineering workshops. So we did 5 of those. We passed out a lot of mugs and ate a lot of cupcakes. So it was like I was traveling around my very own Anthony Bourdain show, trying out different cupcake places. But we are back from that, actually in from the red-eye flight last night from our SF, our final workshop. But we are back here with you today. And today we have with us Shantanu, new to the live stream. So hello, Shantanu. He's going to come and tell us a little bit about our offerings with our multiple LLMs. So Shantanu, you want to introduce yourself?
Definitely. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another session of Tabnine Live. My name is Shantanu Kedar. I lead product marketing here at Tabnine. I'm new to Tabnine Live, but not new to the company. I joined Tabnine about like 6, maybe 7 months ago now, and based in Boston. So that's where I am.
Nice. So, what are we going to talk about today? So let's bring up the slides. So we're going to be talking about the best LLM for software development. Do you want to go ahead and kick us off, Shantanu?
Definitely. Yeah. So as Adrian mentioned, we're going to talk about the best LLMs or best models for software development. So as some of you may know, we have the switchable models capability, right? So the capability that allows you to switch the models for Tabnine chat and use that LLM to power all chat interactions. So we have had this capability for a few months now and want to share some lessons learned or data around how customers and users are using these models for real world use cases. So we'll be sharing a lot of that data as part of this presentation and kind of like share some tips and best practices around which models are being used or which models are really good for certain use cases. So that's the plan for today. Before we dig in, just wanted to provide a brief overview of what Tabnine is, especially for folks who might be new to Tabnine or doesn't know a whole lot about the company. So Tabnine is an AI coding assistant that you control. Tabnine is, you can use Tabnine to accelerate and simplify various aspects of the software development lifecycle while keeping your code compliant, private, and secure. Tabnine produces recommendations that are highly personalized and highly accurate, and you can use Tabnine for many different use cases, such as code creation, generation of tests, writing documentation, maintaining software, and much more. Tabnine is the pioneer in this space. We are the originators of the AI code assistant category, and we introduced our first AI autocomplete for Java back in 2018. I'll skip the second red box because we'll be talking a lot about switchable models and what models are available as part of this talk. But want to kind of highlight a few things. So we support over 80 programming languages and frameworks. All major IDEs are supported, so fully integrated with VS Code, the JetBrains families of IDEs, Visual Studio, as well as Eclipse. And Tabnine is a leader in this space. We have over 1 million developers across thousands of companies who use our products. It's a Series B company. We are backed by top-tier investors such as Atlassian, Khosla Ventures, Qualcomm, and Telstra. Another thing that I want to highlight is the freedom or the flexibility that users get when it comes to using Tabnine. So you can consume Tabnine as a secure SaaS offering, so in a multi-tenant or a full like a single-tenant SaaS environment. In addition to that, you can also deploy Tabnine in a private environment. So you can deploy Tabnine on-prem, in a VPC, or do a fully air-gapped deployment. So that's like a really brief overview of what Tabnine is. So it kind of like level sets us to what we're going to talk about. So here's like a brief agenda. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we'll talk about how switchable models can be used to future-proof your AI investments. We'll talk about like what are switchable models, like why did we even create this capability, like why do customers want switchable models, and also show how this works in action. We'll also talk about how like Tabnine like leverages not just the LLMs but also your context, your AI agents, the developer experience, and uses all these components to produce like responses to your user prompts. So we'll cover that, and then we'll kind of cover the models. So we have a brand new LLM, Tabnine Protected 2. So this is our newest LLM that was released fairly recently. It's available to all of you. So we'll talk about the performance aspects of this LLM, share some benchmark results as well as data from the real world, and then more importantly, talk about how customers are using the proprietary models from Tabnine as well as models from third-party, popular models from third-party vendors. So we'll kind of cover all those aspects in the presentation as well. And then lastly, we'll kind of like cover like how to best practices on selecting a model for a given use case in Tabnine.
Yep, right. And we have a question. When will you guys get support for Claude 3.5 Sonnet? And as you can see from the list, we have support for it. Has it been about a month that we've had that out?
I would say so, yeah, like month, maybe a month and a half. So Claude 3.5 Sonnet, it's supported. Like if you're a pro user, you have access to that in your Tabnine chat.
Yeah, it's definitely one that I use a lot.
So if you look at the overall landscape for LLMs, I mean, this landscape is changing really rapidly. I mean, newer models, more bigger models, powerful models are being introduced in the market at a rapid pace. Like these headlines over here are just like a small subset. I mean, there's not an exhaustive list, but models that came out in the first half of 2024 itself. Again, a really small subset, like way more models that came out in the first half. But if you can see that, I mean, one thing to note is that you have like newer vendors that are entering this space and creating their own LLMs. In addition to that, you also have vendors creating newer versions of their LLMs. Like a really good example is Claude, like as in the question that just came up. So if you look at March of this year, March 2024, Anthropic released the Claude 3 family of models. So that's what like Claude, Sonnet, Opus, and Haiku. So back in March, these were the latest and greatest. Like the state of the art was Claude 3. And then just a few months later, in June of this year, Anthropic released Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So this significantly outperforms its previous generations. So the point to make over here is that, hey, like, I mean, this field is changing very rapidly. And what's state of the art today is not going to be state of the art like a month from now or 2 months from now. And you see this trend from other vendors as well. You have like the GPT-4o, you have from Cohere, you have the Command R model, and then a month later, they release the Command Argus model. So how do you kind of keep on top of all of this? Like, how do you make sure that you are in a situation where you are able to leverage all this innovation that's been coming out from these various LLMs? So one thing that we heard from customers on a very regular basis is this whole flexibility, right? I mean, if you look at historically AI for software development, engineering teams often had to pick both together. So they have to pick the AI coding assistant as well as its underlying model. So one good example is that, hey, like if you're using GitHub Copilot, you use Copilot as well as the GPT family of models, and you have to like pick both of those together. But what we heard from customers like on a very regular basis is that, hey, like we need more flexibility. What if I want to select a model that is different from the one that is used to power my coding assistant? What if I want to use a model that is best for my use case, right? As in like that way I don't have to like switch between different AI coding assistants, or don't have to like worry about like running multiple different coding assistants in my company. Similarly, customers want to use like one model for a given use case, another model for another use case. And we'll kind of like show this like with data like towards the later part of the presentation as to why it's important. Along those same lines, customers want to like connect Tabnine to their own private LLM instances, or pick models based on how that model performs for their programming language or frameworks, or take into account the privacy policies of the model or the data privacy policies of the model, the code the model was trained on. So the point over here is that it's not as simple as, hey, let me select the most popular model out there and call it a day. There are all these nuances that are taken into consideration when selecting models. And then most importantly, like customers don't want to get logged in, like as in like this aspect of not getting logged into a particular LLM or a family of LLMs is important. And then also making sure that you're taking advantage of all the new models. So like as we saw in the previous slide, like you can have like a really good model today, but then 3 months from now, that's not going to be the case. So making sure that you have like this freedom and flexibility to make the most of the LLMs that come out in the future. Like we also believe that like in the near future, like LLMs will become a commodity. You'll also have like SLMs, which are like models that are like built for specific tasks. So you need to have that flexibility to choose like the model that is right for your use case.
Yeah, SLM meaning small language model. So yeah.
And so to address this problem, this situation, we introduce the switchable models for AI chat. So with this capability, you can switch the LLM that underpins our AI chat and use that LLM to power all chat interactions. We give you several different model options. You can select from proprietary models from Tabnine as well as popular models from third parties. So you have that flexibility, and we'll kind of talk about like what those models are in the upcoming slides. In addition to this, we give users full control. So as I mentioned, Tabnine is an AI code assistant that you control. So we are staying true to our values and giving users utmost control when it comes to selecting the underlying models. If you're on Tabnine Pro, all the models are available to you, and you can pick and choose the models that you want. You can change models on the fly based on the use case that you're working on. On the other hand, if you are on the enterprise tier, if you're like a Tabnine enterprise customer, Tabnine admins have like complete control on what models are available to their engineering teams. So you can pick and choose, you can enable, disable models. So like complete control on making sure the right models are available to your teams. Another important thing to note is that all the capabilities of chat are available with every single model. So this includes the features and functionalities of chat, the AI agents, the context, all the capabilities that make Tabnine great are available with every single model. So it's not as if you're missing out on something if you choose one model versus another. So this capability allows you to future-proof your AI investments. It avoids any vendor lock-in. I mean, if you just look at the past few months, we may have introduced, I think we have introduced support for like 6, maybe 7 models. So Tabnine is fully committed to introducing support for newer models as and when they emerge in the future. And for some reason, the GIF is not working, but wanted to kind of like show you like the experience. I think we can like show it towards the later part with the demo. It's fairly straightforward. Like it takes like Aydrian's point, like it's what, like a few seconds to change the model that powers your chat. So it's very easy to pick the right model for a given use case. So Tabnine is built to make the most of every LLM it connects to. So one important thing to note is that when it comes to generating a response for your prompt, there are many components that are involved. LLM is one of the components, but then equally important are factors such as the AI agents, the developer experience, the context. So all of these things are important, and all of these things play like a critical role in making sure you are getting a response to your prompt which you find acceptable and which you find accurate. So with switchable models, you get the best of both worlds. You get all the raw power that comes with the LLMs, so the rich understanding of the programming languages and the frameworks that is built into the model. So you get that. In addition to this, you also get the software development, like the developer experience, the AI agents, the context that Tabnine has created to best exploit this raw power that comes with the LLM. So again, like as in the point that I'm trying to make is that, I mean, like LLM is not the only thing that gives you the answer. Like these other things are really important. And with the switchable models capability, you are able to leverage all of those. So Tabnine, we offer many or like several different agents. So these agents enable you to accelerate and simplify the software development lifecycle. These agents are fully embedded in the AI chat, and you can leverage all these agents with any of the models. So you have an agent called onboarding agent, which enables you to better understand the code in an existing project. You have agent for code creation. Similarly, there's an agent for generating tests. And again, like a plug for this, but we recently introduced a new version of this test agent, which is significantly powerful as compared to the previous version. So the new test agent, it allows you to create a comprehensive test plan with detailed test cases. It's available to all of you, so definitely give it a shot. We have agents for fixing code, documentation, explaining code. That's another agent that we have, which is very helpful when you have code, like some legacy code that you want to understand, or you're like working in a language that is something that you're not very familiar with. And then lastly, agents that can help you like refactor code, add functionality, fix a bug, and so on. So all of these agents are built to take advantage of the various LLMs that are available with the AI chat. Another important thing to note is that Tabnine is built to provide highly personalized recommendations with every single model that you use. And this is important because, I mean, in AI, context is everything. So by design, all these LLMs are universal in nature. So they may be trained on vast amounts of data, they contain like billions of parameters, but they are not aware of your specific code and your specific or your like distinctive patterns. So this means that if you use like an LLM standalone, the answers or the responses that you get back are often accurate, but they are like fairly generic and not very useful. So this is where like context becomes really important in making sure like Tabnine is able to give that context to the LLM so that it generates the right response. So we leverage many different technologies for gaining the context. RAG is one of the most important ones. And what we do is that we augment the prompt with your context and generate responses that are highly personalized and highly accurate. There are like 4 different layers of personalization that we offer. Each layer builds on top of another. So context, which is what you see on the left-hand side of the screen. This is the first layer, if you will. So this allows you, like with context, Tabnine leverages the locally available code and data, like locally available data in your IDE as context, and uses this to give you highly personalized recommendations. There are many sources of information that we leverage within the IDE, such as open files, comments, open projects, any repos that you may have connected to, project metadata. So all of this is taken into account to give that additional context to generate the right response. In addition to context, we also have connection. So this is for Tabnine Enterprise users. You have the option of connecting Tabnine to your global code base repos. So you can connect Tabnine to your GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket repos, or any Git-based repository, and give Tabnine that global context. So that way you get like even highly or even more personalized responses. Context and connection, they are more, I would say, like implicit way of telling Tabnine like how to answer a particular question. And then in addition to that, we also have coaching, which is expert guidance or an explicit way of telling Tabnine how to respond. So you can codify your institutional knowledge using coaching and enforce the adherence of Tabnine to your coding standards and guidelines. This is something that the engineering team is working on and will be available in the near future. The fourth layer that we offer is customization. So this is model fine-tuning. So you can take the proprietary models from Tabnine, you can fine-tune them using your own code, your own data, and create custom models and use them for your chat interactions. This is especially beneficial for customers who have a lot of code in a programming language that is either bespoke or is underrepresented in the training data set. I mean, we have like customers who have like System Verilog, I feel, is one example where customers have seen like a lot of value from customization. So that's another capability that we have.
So we got a question for IntelliJ. The Tabnine plugin is very good. Thank you. However, for local LLMs via Ollama, the only option currently have available is the Continue plugin. Is this something that is you guys have on the roadmap? So if you are talking about having access to Ollama, I believe we are working on that. We just got access to it, I think, in AWS, so we're playing around with that, and you might very well see that in the model switcher coming soon. If you're talking about using it as part of your local LLM, that's not something that we have today. I don't know if you have any other light on utilizing local LLMs other than the one that we currently have for our code completion, but that's our own model. Good question. When does Tabnine read through your code base? So we have methods of pulling in the information. And so Shantanu mentioned, files that you have opened. If you are importing any files into the file you have opened, it will trace those links. It does index your workspace, so it tries to use that whenever we're enhancing the prompt. So it's nice things like, bring me back code that's in TypeScript because this is a TypeScript project, rather than bring me back, the answer in Python, right? Because that's just not relevant to your case. It also can read through any of your package files, so package.json. I forgot what the names of the files are for the other ones, but so that way it has knowledge of what tools you have used. So that way, if we are using Prisma, it knows, whenever it's connecting to the database, it's probably going to be using Prisma rather than, just connecting through whatever the maybe generic Postgres driver is.
Yeah. And as Adrian mentioned, like as in the local context, there's like a toggle that you can enable and disable to like either decide whether to like expose Tabnine to your context or not. And then I think the other question was around like connecting to your code base. So that's like the second like C on this plot connection. So this is an optional capability, like as in this is available to Tabnine enterprise users. And this is something that like it doesn't happen by default. It's up to you to decide which repos to connect or even connect Tabnine, or whether to connect Tabnine to your code base or not. So we give customers that flexibility and control on deciding whether to connect to code repos, and if so, which code repos to connect to.
Yeah, and connection is an enterprise feature, so it's not something that you'll see on Pro.
Exactly.
What other sorts of connections are built into Tabnine, e.g. debugger context? Where is the documentation connection coming from? So connections, when we're talking about connection, like we can pull in code sources and non-code sources. So I think right now it's largely based on Git repos. So if you have documentation inside of your repo, we can easily work on that. We are finalizing our connection with Atlassian products such as Jira tickets and Confluence. And I think we have more in the works, but I'm not sure right now, or I don't want to promise anything that's we don't have a date for. But yeah. And then are prompts rate limited? That's a good question. Yes, they are, especially with the models that are not ours. But the rate limit is set so high that if you hit it, there's probably something wrong going on.
Yeah. No, I think as Adrian mentioned, as in there are rate limits, but the limits are so high that for most use cases, normal use cases, we haven't had customers complaining that, hey, like I ran into like a rate limiting issue. All right, so moving on. So here are the various options that are available to you as part of switchable models. So we have two proprietary models from Tabnine, Tabnine Protected 2 and Tabnine plus Mistral. In addition to this, we also have models from third parties. So we have 3.5 Sonnet from Anthropic, GPT-4o from OpenAI, Command R from Cohere, as well as CodeStral, which is the code-based model from Mistral. What we also do is that we give users some more guidance and more information when it comes to selecting models for a given use case. So as I mentioned before, when it comes to selecting models, like it's not as if, hey, let me select the best model that's available today according to the press release from that company and like I'm done. Like often customers need some more information around like how to select a model. So for example, customers want to know about, okay, like the model performance. So the programming language or the framework that I'm using, what's the performance of the model for that? Another one is privacy. Okay, like what's the data privacy aspect of the model? As in, will my data be used by the model provider to train the foundational models? Will that be shared with somebody else? So that's another thing that's top of mind for users. And then another one is protection. So what we call protection is protection from IP infringement issues. So what data, what code was used to train these models? What if I get a recommendation that matches someone else's code? Like, will I run into any trouble if I accept that recommendations? So many different factors go into or like are taken into account when deciding what model to select. And what we do is that we surface a lot of this information in the model selector UI. So for each model, we have like labels such as like the performance class. So like best class of performance is what you have with most of the models. And then we also talk about whether the model is private or protected. So Tabnine Protected 2, that's a model that gives you best class of performance. It's fully private, it's fully protected. Tabnine plus Mistral, again, like best class of performance. not private, or private but not protected, and then the third-party models are not private, not protected, but they give you like really good performance. So this is important because choosing model, like it also depends on what project or use case you have, right? So if you have a project where there are very strict license compliance issues, and make sure that whatever recommendations that you're getting, like you're not going to run into any IP issues and so on, you can use a model like Tabnine protected. So you have a model for that. If you're working on projects where you don't have such strict license compliance issues, you can select a model that's optimized for performance. So you can select Claude 3 Sonnet or 3.5 Sonnet, or you can select Command R. So again, like having that flexibility is important, so that way you can choose the right model for your project, for your use case.
Yeah, and kind of a point of clarification on the privacy. On the Tabnine side, we're always going to keep your data private. It's only going to exist in memory until the request is made, and then we will get rid of on our side. So we will not be holding anything on our side. The part you need to worry about is with the individual models. So if you send something to GPT-4o or Claude Sonnet, they might retain part of it. So that's what's keeping it from being a fully private model. So if that's important to you, then the best option is going to be the Tabnine protected model.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, Adrian. And another capability that we have like recently introduced is for our enterprise customers who do private deployments. So you can connect Tabnine to your private LLM instance. So that way, like you have like that private model available to you. So you can connect Tabnine to your GPT instance that you may have like through like a private instance of Azure. So that capability is also available to enterprise self-deployed customers. All right, let's look at Tabnine Protected 2. So as I mentioned before, this is a brand new model from Tabnine. It performs really well, and at the same time, it is a license-safe LLM. So I'll talk about what license-safe LLM is in a given minute. But this model was released recently, and it's available to all the users. So when you select Tabnine Protected in your model selector UI, what you're getting behind the scenes is the new model. So we ran several benchmarks in the lab, as well as looked at real-world data. And what we saw was that this model performs or outperforms not only the older generation or the older version of this model, but it also outperforms GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is a much bigger model, which is a model that's trained on all sorts of data and code, right? So again, like really high performance improvement with this model. We'll talk about a couple of benchmarks in the upcoming slides. Another thing to note is that this model is trained on a much larger corpus of code. It has a bigger context window. It uses RAG more effectively. It has a much more nuanced understanding of the user the user prompt, and as a result of this, it's able to deliver highly personalized recommendations. Similar to the older version of the model, this one is also fully private. So as Adrian mentioned, we have like zero data retention policy when using this model. We do not store customer code. We do not share code with third parties, do not use it to train our models. So again, you get like total code privacy when using this model. Similar to the first version of Tabnine Protected, the new model is also like purpose-built for software development, and it's fully private. So it's trained exclusively on code that is permissively licensed. And this is important because like we have controlled what went into the model. So we feel confident that, hey, like as in the recommendations that you're going to get back from Tabnine Protected 2 are not going to match any proprietary code. So this way, there isn't any concern around accepting whatever you get back. You're like completely safe over there. So that's another key point about this model. So this is what I meant by like license safe LLM. So like a license compliant model that you can use and don't have to worry about like whether I can accept a response from this model or not.
And what's really nice is you can go to our Trust Center and actually request a list of every repo that was used to train this model. So we are very transparent when it comes to the privacy and the protection that comes with our LLM. Question from Maori. Does the personalization use RAG? Yes. So that first level of personalization context, that is utilizing RAG. And then also the second level connection is also using RAG. So we are indexing either your workspace or the connections that you make, and using those to using that information to enrich the prompts that you are entering into the chat. We got what evals are being run to determine performance? Are those academic benchmarks or internal in-context evals? Shantanu, you want to take that one?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. That's something I was planning to cover on the next slide. So this is
Oh,
a good segue.
good timing.
So what we did was we did both, as in we did internal benchmarks, so like benchmarks that we ran in our lab. So that's like one set of data that we'll be covering on this slide and the next. And then I'll also show you data from the real world that shows the performance of this model related to others. So the first benchmark that we ran, that's like the results of that are shown over here. So we considered three different models as part of this benchmark evaluation. Tabnine Protected 2, so this is the new model. Tabnine Protected 1, which is the old model, and then GPT 3.5 Turbo. What we did was we asked the same set of questions to each model and evaluated the response on various different criteria. So we evaluated the response for relevance, so to check if the response from the model, does it align with the prompt or not. We also evaluated the response for coherence, as in, hey, like, as in the response from the model, like, I mean, does it have logical flow? Is it easy to understand? So that one was a second criteria. Third one was for accuracy. So check the factual accuracy of the response. Also check the response for completeness, which means that, hey, like, is the response that you're getting back, does it cover all the various aspects of the user prompt? And then lastly, we also evaluated the response for code correctness. So this, I believe, is important, especially when you are evaluating models for software development use cases. And as part of this, we checked for the syntax, which means that, hey, like, as in the response, does it adhere to the syntax of the programming language? And then we also checked for semantic correctness, because in programming, there are multiple ways to solve the same problem, right? So if you take the response and if you compare it only with one response or with one answer, it's a very narrow comparison, and it's not a good indication of whether this model would be useful in real world cases or not. So those are the various criteria that we use to evaluate the responses from the model. And then in addition to this, we evaluated the chat responses with various degrees of context. So the plot that you see on the right-hand side, like the first set of bars, like they represent the evaluation for free text. So this means these are questions where no context is required. You can answer those questions like standalone. So that's the first like data set. Another one was questions that require your local context. So locally available data in your ID is something that is needed to answer those questions. So that was the second layer. And the third one is retrieval, which means that these questions required like context of your global code base to answer. So we kind of like looked at all of those like those degrees of or increasing degrees of context to kind of evaluate these models. We calculated the score or the response for calculated the score for each response, aggregated the scores, and kind of like plotted them over here. So higher the score, the stronger the performance. And what you can see is that like Tabnine Protected 2, which is the new model, it not only performs much better as compared to the previous version, but it also delivers performance that is higher than GPT 3.5 Turbo. So that's the first benchmark. The second benchmark that we did was we kind of like leveraged the multiple E and human eval benchmarks. So these are like industry standard benchmarks. I feel they span 18 different programming languages. I think multiple E was for Python. I think human eval added like 17 other languages or vice versa. But like the point being, I think they cover like 18 different languages. And even over here, we evaluated the model performance for checking like the syntax as well as semantic correctness. The scores that you see over here, they are the pass at one scores for the model, which means this is like the ability of the model to generate the correct response to the prompt in the first attempt itself. So this is like a good or a true indication of whether this model will be available or will be valuable in the real world or not. So again, like Tabnine Protected 2, which is the red bar, the first kind of like line or bar, you can see that Tabnine Protected 2 delivered superior performance like across various different programming languages and performed not only the previous version of this model, but also other popular models out there.
Yeah, so it looks like you're not having to sacrifice performance to be able to get privacy and protection. So that's really great to see.
Exactly.
We have a question. Are all models equally aware of your code?
Yeah. So in both these benchmarks, like the all the testing parameters, if you will, were the same. Like the only thing that changed was the model, like as in, so that way, like it's like a true apples to apples comparison, and we aren't like kind of like giving one model more like knowledge or context. Okay, so next section is, okay, we have had this capability in the market for a few months now. So wanted to share some lessons learned around how people or how users are using these models. So this kind of gets into, okay, like which LLMs do users really like for software development? So a couple of things to note. The data that I'm going to share is usage data for the past 30 days. And another really important thing to note is that this is data only from a small subset of users, and these users have given us explicit permission to use their data. So again, like as I mentioned, we have zero data retention policy. So we have that. It's just the data that I have over here. It's only from people who have said that, hey, like we have our permission to use this data. So just something to kind of like to point out. So this plot over here shows the popularity of the models. So of all the models that are available, which ones are used more commonly by users? So as you can see, Tabnine Protected is still used by a vast majority of users. So this goes on to show the need for having like a fully private or a fully protected model, so that you can use like you can, like if you have like those kind of use cases, you can use like a model like Tabnine Protected. The next plot, what I did was I removed the proprietary models from Tabnine and only looked at the popularity of the third-party models. So over here, GPT-4o, this is the most popular model, followed by, or most popular third-party model, I should say, followed by Claude 3.5 Sonnet, Codestral, and then the list goes on. Next up is the consumption rate. So this is the overall consumption rate. So think of consumption rate as, or I would say like consumption rate is a good indicator of the performance of the model. The way we calculate consumption rate is that, like if you're using Tabnine with a model, the responses that you get back, like if you do something useful with that response. So for example, if you insert that response, or if you copy that response, or if you give it a thumbs up to that response using that widget, all of these actions contribute to the consumption rate. And what you see over here is the consumption rate for various models. So a few interesting observations. So GPT-4o, that's the most popular model. But then when you look at the performance of the consumption rates, that's not the case. So this is the point that I was trying to make. As in, just because a model is very popular, it doesn't mean it's the most performing model. So in this case, Claude 3.5 Sonnet is the leader. Another really cool thing to note is the number one model, which is Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and then the last model in this list, which is Claude 3 Sonnet. So just in a matter of what, like 3 months since these models came out, like how the plots changed, like as in, you have like a new version of the model that performs significantly better as compared to the older version of the model. And then the third thing that I want to point out is Tabnine Protected. So you can look at the consumption rate for that, and you can see that it performs, or the consumption rate for that model is higher as compared to GPT 3.5 Turbo, as well as Tabnine plus Mistral, which is the other proprietary model that we have. So this data basically kind of complements the results that we have seen in the lab benchmarks. So like data from real world that shows that Tabnine Protected 2 performs better than bigger models like GPT 3.5 Turbo. The last thing that I wanted to kind of also call out is, I mean, most of these third-party models are fairly generic models, right? I mean, they are trained on all sorts of data. They support like many different use cases. So often, like the benchmarks that you see, like in other places, they are typically for generic use cases. They aren't like super specific to software development. But what we are showing you here is, I mean, not only data that is very specific to software development use cases, but then also like data from the real world. These are not like some lab experiments. So it's a good way to kind of look at where people are finding value in these models.
Right. So we get a question: will model settings like temperature, top_P, etc., be exposed via the plugin? And to my knowledge, they are not. Do you have anything to add to this, Shantanu?
Same answer as yours, Aydrian. I don't think they are, but we can like check with the product team.
Yeah, and in most cases, we try to abstract that information away, so it's just as easy as switching it.
Yeah. So the data that you see on this graph, this is for the overall consumption rate. So you can use Tabnine for many different use cases, right? So this is like If you combine all those use cases, this is the overall consumption rate data. And then what I also did was, let's look at the consumption rate for a given use case. So in this case, this is the consumption rate for the fixed code use case. So you might see, like, what's interesting to see over here is that the number one model is no longer Claude 3.5 Sonnet, it's Command R. So this goes on to show that, hey, like, as in one model can perform really well for one use case, another model can perform well for another use case. So like something that you should like think about. For example, if you don't get like really good response with a given model, change the model to see like if you get like a better response with another one.
And so this use case here. This is using our fix agent, right? So these are for people who have been executing like our /fix code command to work with an existing piece of code.
Exactly. And then similarly, we have the consumption rate for the generate test use case. So again, like to Adrian's point, like this is the data that we have collected when people are using the generate test AI agent. Claude 3.5 Sonnet is at the top over here. It's no longer Command R. So point being, like models, like they perform differently for different use cases as well. Another thing to note is that we have the new test agent. So again, like significant improvement as compared to the older version that we have. The new test agent enables you to create comprehensive test plans with detailed test cases. So we anticipate that the consumption rates across all different models will dramatically increase over the course of like the next few months as more people start using the new test agent. So the test agent, it's available to all of you. So definitely give it a shot.
And that we just released the test agent in the last week, right?
Yeah. I believe it was Tuesday of this week. So I don't know, 2, maybe 3 days old.
Yeah. So go check out our blog. There's a post that Shantanu created, talks all about the new test agent. So check that out.
And then we also have the consumption rate data for the document code use case. Again, like over here, Claude 3.5 Sonnet is the leader, followed by GPT-4o and Command R. And those were like all the talk track for the slides. And passing the transition over here to Aydrian for a demo.
Yeah, and before we do that, we do have a question. How does Tabnine Protected 2 compare to GPT-4o? Do we have benchmarks from that? Anything that you can elaborate?
Not necessarily lab benchmarks, but I think we have this one over here. So overall consumption rate, so GPT-4o is over here, Tabnine Protected over here. But again, like performance, as I mentioned, is just one factor. Like another important thing to note is the privacy and protection. So Tabnine Protected to fully private, fully protected model, whereas in case of GPT-4o, like as in it's unclear what data was used to train the model. So there is that protection aspect, like that model is not protected. And then also like the privacy aspect, it's not a fully private model. So again, like it depends on what use case you're looking for, is how I would look at it.
Yeah, just because it's a larger model doesn't mean it's going to be a better model. I think we can see with larger models, like you might see a little bit more latency in getting back the response just because it's so big. It might contain things like the mating habits of sloths, but from a coding standpoint, you're probably not going to need that. And so that's where Tabnine Protected can come in, being trained more specifically on information needed by coders, so we can get those snappy results.
No, really good question.
All right, so let's go over to a demo, and I'm just going to kind of show off the different things here. So here is my screen. I'm going to click on the right stuff. But first off, because that GIF didn't work, let's go ahead and take a look at the Tabnine switcher. So by default, you're going to see Tabnine Protected. This is the Tabnine Protected 2 model. But if we change this drop down, we can see all of our options. So in addition, we have CodeStroll, Tabnine plus Minstrel, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, Command R, GPT-4o, and each one of them are tagged for if they are private, not private, protected, not protected, and you can even expand to see a little more information about this. So like the CodeStroll integrated model is an advanced generative model created by Minstrel AI, trained on more than 80 programming languages, etc. So this model is recommended for users looking for the best possible performance, who are comfortable sharing their data externally and using models trained on any publicly available code. And then it goes into some information about privacy, performance, protection, and we have these for all of the models here. So I am going to select, I like using Claude Sonnet, so I'm probably some of that data that you saw that Claude Sonnet was rising in the ranks. So I'm going to have it Claude Sonnet. Just to kind of explain what my demo environment is here. This is a Remix app, so I'm a full stack developer. I like using Remix, and so that's kind of what I'm demoing. It's great for demoing like a lot of React stuff. So we're going to use that. But it's just a standard application that uses Vite or Vite. I say both of them. Pick which one you like. So the standard setup. And so we can come over here, and I am going to go back to the chat, and I'm going to ask a simple question. How do I retrieve to-dos for the logged in user? We'll see what it gets us. So this is Claude Sonnet, and it says to retrieve to-dos for the logged in user, you'll need to modify the code to use Remix loader function and the use loader data hook. So that's great. So it says first import the necessary functions, Remix and Prisma code. Cool. So it's telling us to create a loader function. In Remix, this is just how we do like a GET request. So it's going to pull back the logged in user. It's going to even do the stuff if there isn't a logged in user, that's going to return unauthorized. You can see here that it's formulating the Prisma to do. So it's actually grabbing the data from the database using Prisma. And then we are modifying our default function, which is what renders the page, to actually go through all of these. And then it even has the completed code. And then it goes further and says you'll need to implement the get logged in user ID function to retrieve the current user ID from the session. This typically involves checking the user's session or authentication token. So it gives us all this information. So this is the way that Claude Sonnet suggested to do it. Let's go ahead and we'll try this again, but this time we'll go over to, let's start at GPT-4o. And so I'm just going to ask it the same thing. And we'll see how it explains it. So this one starts with a high-level overview. So it says get the logged in user's ID, query the database, and pass the to-dos to your component. And so it is doing pretty much the same thing. I'm seeing that it's actually going a step further, and it's using our session.server file. It's assuming that we have this. And I think we do. So that's good. But it's grabbing the user ID. It's doing a similar find and doing the same thing. So yeah, and then it even goes further. So because it assumed we had this session, it's even showing us how we can export that from there. And then it's even verifying the to-do model. So that's pretty nice. So two very similar but slightly different explanations or solutions based on what model we're having. Something that's kind of interesting, you can see here that we're using the workspace. So this is where Tabnine is indexing the workspace, figuring out the packages, the different things you're using to come up with this response. Let's go and do a new conversation, but this time I'm going to turn that off. and we're going to see what we get. So how do I retrieve to-dos from the for the logged in user? Again, same question. Wow. So that's okay. So this response, I can already see that it doesn't even know that we're using the Remix framework. So let's take a look. Here it's saying we need to authenticate the user and query the database. So here's an example using Node.js and Express setup with a MongoDB database. Well, we're not using MongoDB, and we are using not Express, but we're using Remix. So you can see it's telling you how to do it if you were doing it from scratch, but there's a world of difference between of the response. So this, I think, would be considered a bad response if any of your developers were to get this, because they'd be like, well, this is not anywhere close to what we're doing. I can see that very, very quickly, very fast. This is kind of the power that Tabnine is putting on top of the LLM by pulling this context, using RAG to augment the prompt and pulling back more relevant data. So that is an example for that. We have a question from a YouTube user. Do I need API keys to use external models? The short answer is no. We have all of them available to you. So that's not anything extra that you need to do. Now, we do have the option in Enterprise that you can bring your own models along. So if you have your own API keys, we can use those for Enterprise. But if you're just a pro user on a small team, you'll have access to all the models. Earlier, we mentioned they are rate limited, but we do try to keep the rates high enough that you'll probably never see them.
Yeah. And I think the other interesting thing is that, like, if you're a pro user, there's no additional cost to use any of these models. You just pay the flat, like $12 per user per month for Tabnine Pro,
Mm-hmm.
and usage of any of these models is included as part of that.
Right. Question for models that are not protected. How much of your data is shared when you make a request? That's a good question. We share the same amount of data to all models. So if you don't want your data shared, that would be a good instance where you would turn off the workspace. So that would disable the kind of the enrichment of the prompt. So like you saw here. Now this is kind of going to be similar to if you are copying and pasting code in the chat GPT, right? Because you're not going to get all that added context. But if you do have the workspace turned on, it's going to send all of the code that it thinks is relevant. So it's going to look at the file that it's going to look at the file that you had open, the last couple of files you had open. I'm not sure. I think the recently accessed tabs, if you had tabs open, it's going to follow this import here. So if you had things imported, it's going to pull that in as well. So if you have workspace awareness on, you're going to be sharing any code that we think is relevant. So it's not going to be the entire workspace each time, because that's just going to be too massive for the prompt. But there is going to be an amount. And so in some cases that might not matter if it's sharing information about a publicly available package that you're using, that's not going to matter. But if you have private packages with a code that you don't want to, share, those are things that you want to think about.
Yeah, and I think to Adrian's point, like in many of these cases, when using the third-party models, we are subject to their terms of use. So like we have less control on that. And then I think making a plug, like if this is a case where you just don't want to share anything externally, Tabnine protected, like that model is available to you by default.
Mm-hmm.
So something that you can use for those use cases.
And if you want even more privacy, you can do Tabnine Enterprise on-prem, deploy it behind a firewall, and nothing's getting out. So question, when indexing, do you guys store code chunks anywhere in Tabnine? So for indexing the workspace, there is, I believe it's an in-memory vector database where all of these chunks are stored. And then there is another one for if you're using connection, right? We got to store these somewhere, but they're usually vector databases. I'm not sure if the connection one is in memory or not, but the workstation one is. Does it provide test coverage code for the file we opened? So that would be probably using the test agent, or you can just ask. So let me go over to one of my, let's see, I think this is a good one. So let me pull this up. I'm going to start a new conversation. I'm going to switch back over to Claude Sonnet. And I can do something as simple as this is open. So this is the context. And so I can say, generate unit tests for the input component. And so we'll wait. There. The other thing about Claude Sonnet is it always starts with certainly, which just seems pretty happy. So you can see, just without using the test agent, we are presented with a test file. So this would be, and it will actually tell you down here. So to use these tests, create a new file named input.test.tsx in the same directory, and then copy the above code in. So you can see that it's created a number of tests. So renders an input element, applies default classes, applies custom class name, forwards ref correctly, handles type prop correctly, handles other props correctly, handles user input, applies disabled styles when disabled. And so it will try to completely cover the code with tests whenever you ask it to generate it. But that it's no replacement for good code coverage reporting. Like, was there anything else that I was going to demo? I feel like I covered a lot of it with the kind of that Prisma example. Another thing that's kind of fun that I like to do is, so let's go to new conversation. If I don't know how to do something, like maybe I want to display a QR code on the screen, I know it's possible, but I've not used a library before. And so I can say, just come in here and ask it, how would I generate a QR code that contains the, I don't know, user's ID and display it on the page. And so we get, let's see, so generate a QR code containing the user's ID and display it on the page. You can use a QR code generation library like qrcode.react. Here's how you can modify. So it gives me the command to install the new package. And then it gives me the code. And so here you can see for this, it's like assuming you have a way to get the current user's ID. This is just an example. So it's grabbing a user, making sure we have a user, and then it's just returning the ID. And then you can see that it's passing it to this QR SVG component to render it. So that's just one way of doing it. But that's Claude Sonnet. And so again, sometimes it's fun to see what something else would give you. So let's ask 4.0. So it's also saying to use the QR code.react. And so let's go new conversation, and let's try Command R. All right, so with this one, so here's an example to generate a QR code. Ooh, this one's, so this is using the use QR code function from React QR code logo. So you can see this one, the QR code is being, it's still being done in the component level. Interesting. So this would be my least favorite one. But yeah, so there's kind of another example of going through different things. Do we have any other questions that we can answer? We are about at time, but we want to make sure that we answer any other questions that you might have. Cool. See, anything else that we wanted that you think we needed to cover, Shantanu?
Nothing that comes to mind. I feel I think we've covered everything.
Yeah. Did we mention? I think a good place to close is, I think we briefly talked about enterprise and the availability to decide which models are available. And I think I have that pulled up. So give me just a second. And I think we have a screenshot we can show. Maybe. Go to the other page. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is, so we do have the ability to set which models are available in your enterprise instance. And your admin has the ability to change this by going into the admin console, going to the models page under settings. Let's make that a little bigger. And it's as easy as going and finding the model you want and either toggling it on or off, right?
Yeah. And as Adrian mentioned, like we give full control to admins at enterprises to decide what models are available at their organization. So by default, Tabnine protected, that's the only model that's available. And then you can contact us and like decide or tell us like which additional models should be made available. And the screenshot that we have over here is that an example where these are the models that were made available by the Tabnine admin and their company. The toggle buttons, like I think it's a great way kind of like to make a model available to like for a specific project. You can enable models, disable models, but like as we mentioned before, it's something that we enable or make sure like Tabnine admins have complete control and they have like the freedom and flexibility to decide only the specific models that should be made available to their engineering teams. So that way, just because you have like all the models that are available in Pro, you don't have that in enterprise. You just pick and choose the models that you want.
Nice. We got a couple more questions from the chat. Where does the RAG happen? Is it in the user machine with some sort of processor, or does it happen in the Tabnine server for Pro users? So with the workspace RAG, so the part that we call context, that is happening on the user's machine. So where it's indexing the workspace, gathering all of the information and enriching the prompt. And then it gets sent over to the Tabnine server. I believe this is correct. It gets sent over to the Tabnine server, and that's where it's being requested. The information is being requested and then sent back. But for the connection, which is the part between the repos, the connected repos, and Tabnine, that is happening on the Tabnine server. And we do have, I don't have access to it right now, but we do have a nice image that kind of shows RAG in detail. So I know that we brought that up as part of our personalization webinar. How large are the RHE projects that it can handle? Or how large are the projects that it can handle? That's a good question. I'm not sure the size. I think it's not actually has to do with the size of the project, but the individual files. So I know we run into some problems when people have had some really, really, really large files in their project, and they turned out to just be like, miscellaneous files that didn't matter. And so we were able to add those to the Tabnine ignore file and get rid of it. But do you have any information on this, Shantanu?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. Like, I mean, we have had cases where, or that we've seen requests from customers where, like, you have like, hey, like this is a big project that have like, can you guys handle it? We haven't typically like run into any major issues, like other than the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think this is another case where, if you're using enterprise, it can handle a larger context and connection windows because it's deployed on-prem and runs on your infrastructure. So there could be requirements based on if it's SaaS or based on yours. So if you have beefier hardware, you can obviously handle more. When does indexing happen? So the workspace index happens, I think, as soon as you open up your project. So it's going to be, and sometimes you can see it down in the bottom of the screen where it says, like, it pops up and says it's indexing. But usually it happens pretty fast, and you don't even realize it's happening. If you're one of those people who like never shuts down their machine, it's going to seem very snappy because, like I said, it's all held in memory. Once you restart, it's going to have to again reindex. But yeah, so the workspace indexing, it happens on your machine, and it happens, as you're using the application. And I think the workspace toggle doesn't turn off the indexing so much as rather chooses whether to use it in that specific prompt. So that way we don't have to re-index the whole project whenever you toggle that on and off. But unless you tell us to use it, it does stay secure on your machine. All right, I think that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you all for joining us. I have a note that our next one is scheduled. It's up here. So you can find that on our LinkedIn page. Oh my gosh. Little voice in my ear. Please, what is the summary of the next one?
I think it's the one with Coder.
Coder. Oh, amazing. Yeah. So we have been working with Coder for a long time, and I'm very excited to release that. If you haven't used Coder, it's individual development environments. So really easy to spin up these environments that use, I think, Visual Studio or a version of it. You can use Tabnine inside of it. Really great. So find that on our LinkedIn page. Go ahead and RSVP. Spread the word. You'll see posts about it here soon, but we have the next one coming at you in 2 weeks, right? I guess I could have clicked on the link.
15th of August. So exact 2 weeks. You're right.
Yeah, exactly 2 weeks from today, the 15th of August, using the power of AI to improve code quality and collaboration. So that will be with Brandon Jung, our VP of Ecosystems, and Tim Quinlan from Coder. So it's going to be exciting. All right. Well, again, thank you for coming. We hope to see you next time. TTFN. Ta-ta for now, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.